They they think of simple people as a lower race, Dad. Please, just don't come, my daughter Sarah begged. She had no idea that the lower race she owed her entire life to was about to take absolutely everything from her new family. The words just hung in the air of our farmhouse kitchen. My own daughter Sarah was standing there, wringing her hands, telling me I wasn't good enough to see her get married. She couldn't even look me in the eye. She was looking at the mud on my work boots, the boots that had paid for her college education, her apartment, and the car she drove. This was the moment my whole life turned upside down. If you want to hear how this unbelievable story unfolds, and trust me, you do not want to miss the ending, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. It's David's parents, she rushed to explain, the words tumbling out. The Montgomerys. They're old money, Dad. They have standards. Standards? I asked, keeping my voice level. They Googled you, she whispered, as if that explained everything. They saw the farm. They saw the equipment. They asked me if you'd be presenting like this at the wedding. She finally looked at my hands, calloused and stained with engine grease. They said a farmer, a simple laborer, would be an embarrassment to their guest. They said it would ruin the prestige of the event. I heard a sharp gasp from the doorway. My wife, Martha, was standing there, a laundry basket clutched to her chest. Her face was white. Sarah, how could you? Martha whispered. Sarah's face hardened. The Montgomerys had done their work well. Mom, please, this is my one chance. This is the Montgomerys. This wedding solidifies everything for David and me. It's just one day. What's the big deal if Dad just stays here? The big deal, I said, my voice now ice, is that you're ashamed of me? It wasn't a question. I saw a flicker of the little girl I used to know, but it was gone, replaced by the cold ambition of her new family. So you're going to make a scene? She asked defensively. No, Sarah, I said, turning away. My hand wasn't even shaking. I'm not going to make a scene at all. I won't be coming to your wedding. She let out a breath of relief, actually relieved, thinking she'd won. She thought I was just a third-rate farmer. She thought I was a nobody. She and the Montgomerys were about to find out just how wrong they were. After Sarah left, the silence in the kitchen was heavier than a winter storm. The front door clicked shut, and it felt final, like the sound of a lock turning. My wife, Martha, finally let the laundry basket fall. She didn't cry, not at first. She just sank into the chair Sarah had just left, the one I'd built, and put her face in her hands. That's not our daughter, Mark, she whispered, her voice muffled. That is not the girl we raised. I know, I said, my voice hollow. I looked out of the window, past the porch, to the old oak tree with the tire swing. I could still see Sarah, maybe 6 or 7 years old, covered in mud, laughing her head off as I pushed her higher and higher. She used to call my work clothes my superhero costume. She'd bury her face in my jacket when I came in from the fields, saying I smelled like earth and hard work. Now that same smell was an embarrassment. That same work was a disgrace. My mind flashed back to the spring of her junior year. She'd been accepted into a prestigious exchange program in Europe, a program that cost more than my best tractor. I didn't even hesitate. I went to the bank, and without telling anyone, not even Martha, I leveraged a piece of land, the North Pasture, the best grazing land I had. I signed the papers, feeling the squeeze, knowing it would mean 2 years of double shifts and cutting back on everything. When she called me from Paris, crying with joy, telling me how it was changing her life, I stood in the barn, dead tired, and felt like the richest man in the world. I'd have sold the whole farm for that moment, and now that investment, that sacrifice, had bought her a new life where I was classified as third sort. What did they do to her, Mark? Martha asked, looking up at me, her eyes finally overflowing. Those people. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. The grease under my nails felt like a brand. They didn't do anything, I said, my voice dangerously calm. They just showed her who she really wanted to be. She's not a victim here, Martha. She made a choice. Martha knew that tone. It was the same tone I used when a blight hit the crops or when a deal went bad. It was the tone that meant I wasn't just going to take the hit. I was going to find a solution. The Montgomerys. I'd only met them once, but that one meeting was all it took. They thought they'd seen all there was to see. They saw a farmer. They saw dirt. They had no idea what was buried underneath it. They and my daughter were about to get an education that no expensive college in Europe could ever provide. The days leading up to the wedding were heavy. Sarah didn't call, not once. It was like she'd cut us out with a surgeon's knife. Martha walked around the house like a ghost, her eyes red. She was torn. She loved her daughter, but she was furious at the betrayal. She'd look at me, her eyes asking the same question over and over. Aren't you going to do something? She didn't know that I already was. See, there's something Sarah and her prestige family didn't understand. The simple farmer they saw? That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. I love the dirt. I love the smell of diesel in the morning and the feel of a hard day's work. I live in this farmhouse because I choose to. The old pickup truck? It's reliable and it does the job. I don't need a fancy car to tell me my worth. But while the Montgomerys were busy inheriting their old money and looking down on everyone, I was busy building. What Sarah thought was the farm was just the homestead, the original few hundred acres I started with. What she didn't know was that Mark's family farm was just the sentimental name for the front gate. The real business, the one my lawyer and a very quiet accountant managed, was Agro Northern Holdings. Agro Northern Holdings doesn't just own a few fields. It owns over 50,000 acres across 3 states. It owns grain elevators, logistics hubs, and, most importantly, a very significant portfolio of commercial real estate. I built an empire from the mud Sarah was so ashamed of. I did it quietly. I learned a long time ago that flashy people attract attention, but quiet people build power. The Montgomerys were flashy. I was quiet. I sat in my office, which Sarah just thought was a storage shed. I wasn't looking at crop reports. I was looking at a detailed financial analysis of Montgomery Capital, the firm her fiancé's father ran. They were flashy, all right? Flashy and desperate. They were leveraged to the hilt, drowning in debt to keep up appearances. And as I traced the lines of their loans, I found something that made me smile. A very large, very high-interest bridge loan they had taken out 6 months ago. They had no idea who held the note. Thinking about their debt reminded me of the one and only time I'd met Arthur and Eleanor Montgomery. It was about 6 months ago, right after Sarah and David got engaged. Sarah had insisted on a small, formal dinner at a high-end restaurant in the city. I remember Martha being so nervous buying a new dress. I just wore my best blazer, which was clean but definitely not designer. I drove us in my truck. It was clean too, but it was still the farm truck. When we pulled up to the restaurant's valet, I saw them. They were standing out front, Arthur checking his gold watch, Eleanor wrapped in a fur coat that probably cost more than my first tractor. The moment they saw my truck, I saw Arthur's lip curl. It was a tiny, almost invisible sneer. He didn't shake my hand. He just sort of nodded at it. Eleanor offered 2 fingers as if she was afraid of catching something. So, Arthur said, once we were seated. The waiter was practically bowing to him. You're in agriculture. He said the word agriculture like it was something you scrape off your boot. That's right, I said. Farming, mostly corn and soy, some cattle. How quaint, Eleanor chimed in, taking a tiny sip of her wine. I do adore the farmer's market. It's so rustic. The rest of the dinner was a performance. They talked loudly about their summer in the Hamptons, their new yacht, and the disaster of having to fly commercial once when their private jet was being serviced. They asked Sarah about her education, praising the European school I'd paid for, as if it had somehow scrubbed the farm girl taint off of her. They never asked me another question. I was just a piece of furniture. The real insult came at the end. As we were leaving, Arthur clapped his son David on the back. "Good of you to be so open-minded, son," he said, loud enough for me and Martha to hear. It shows character to associate, with all types. He was talking about my daughter, as if she was a charity case. And as we stood waiting for the valet, my truck was brought around. It looked huge and clumsy next to their sleek black Mercedes. Arthur Montgomery looked at my truck, then at me, and he actually chuckled. "My goodness," he said to his wife. "They let that on the road?" Sarah turned bright red, not with anger at them, but with embarrassment at me. I just tipped the valet, helped Martha into the cab, and drove home. But I never forgot that look. They didn't just think I was poor. They thought I was subhuman. They thought I was a joke. And now they were about to find out the punchline. It was 2 weeks before the wedding. I sat in my shed, which was actually a soundproofed office with a dedicated satellite internet line. My wife thought I was ordering seeds. I was pulling up the files on Agro Northern Holdings. My first call was to Ben, my lawyer for 20 years. He's the only one who knows the full extent of my operations. "Ben, it's Mark," I said, my voice flat. "Mark, I was wondering when you'd call," he replied. Ben was sharp. "I saw the wedding announcement in the paper. Montgomery, is this related?" "It is," I said. "That bridge loan from Montgomery Capital. The one we bought from the bank last quarter. Where are they on payments?" There was a pause, the sound of clicking keys. "They just missed their second payment. We're well within our rights to call the entire note due. Mark, if we do that, they're done. They have no other collateral. It's a house of cards." "I know," I said. "I want you to draw up the papers, all of them. Seizure of assets, liquidation, the works. I want them ready to file on Saturday, the 21st. Ben let out a low whistle. "The 21st? That's the wedding day, isn't it?" "You're a cold man, Mark." "Just thorough, Ben. Be ready." I hung up and made a second call. This one was to Carol, my chief financial officer, who handles the real estate portfolio. "Carol, how are you?" "Good, Mark. What's the fire?" "No fire, just a question. Pull up the file on the Oakwood Grand Country Club." "Oakwood?" she said, surprised. "That's one of our best performing land leases. Why?" "Just checking the details," I said. "Remind me of the terms." "Standard lease," she said. "But, oh, that's right. They're in breach. They've failed to submit their environmental impact reports for 2 quarters straight. We've sent them 3 warnings. Legally, we can terminate their lease with 48 hours' notice." A slow smile spread across my face. Sarah had bragged about how exclusive and historic her venue was. It was historic, all right. Historically on my land. "Carol," I said, "I want you to send 2 of our best corporate representatives to that club on Saturday the 21st at exactly 7:30 p.m. I want them to hand-deliver the termination notice to the club manager, and I want them to secure the premises." "Secure? Mark, you mean shut it down? In the middle of a Saturday night?" "That's exactly what I mean," I said, looking out the window at the fields. "The new owners are just inspecting their property." The day of the wedding arrived. Saturday the 21st. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful day for a wedding. At the farmhouse, it was quiet. Martha and I ate breakfast in silence. She had cried herself out. Now she just looked empty. "What are you going to do today, Mark?" she asked me. "Same as always," I said, finishing my coffee. "Work." I went out and started mending a fence on the west pasture, but my mind wasn't on the work. My phone was in my pocket. I was counting down the hours. 3 p.m. The ceremony would be starting. 5 p.m. Cocktail hour. 7 p.m. The reception would be in full swing. I found out later exactly what it was like. The Oakwood Grand Country Club was dripping with money. We're talking thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ancient oak trees in a string quartet. It was the kind of obscene luxury that only people who have never worked a real day in their life can dream up. Sarah, I was told, looked like a princess. Her dress alone cost more than my truck. She was smiling, laughing, living in the fairy tale she'd chosen. She didn't seem to notice that her own father wasn't there. Or if she did, she was hiding it well. Her new in-laws, Arthur and Eleanor Montgomery, were in their element. They glided through the crowd, champagne flutes in hand, accepting congratulations. Arthur was booming, slapping backs the proud patriarch. As they welcomed a politician and his wife, Eleanor was overheard saying, "Oh, it's just wonderful. We were so careful with the guest list. It's a curated event, you understand. We managed to filter out any potential embarrassments. Only the best people for our David and Sarah." Arthur laughed. Yes, quality over quantity. That's the Montgomery way. They were toasting their own quality and their perfect filtered world. They were all sitting down for the main course. The speeches were about to begin. The clock on the wall of the grand ballroom ticked past 7:29 p.m. They had no idea that the quality of their evening was about to expire. The clock struck 7:30 p.m. Back in the grand ballroom, the main courses were being cleared. The band leader smiled and announced the first dance. David, looking smug in his perfect tuxedo, led Sarah to the center of the floor. The music started, some slow, expensive-sounding ballad. They began to dance, and the guests all raised their phones to capture the perfect moment. And then, halfway through the first verse, the music died. Not a fade out. It just stopped. A harsh scratch of audio, followed by total, shocking silence. The guests gasped. The band members looked around, confused. David and Sarah froze on the dance floor, looking awkward. "What's going on?" Arthur Montgomery bellowed from his table. "Get the music back on." But no one was looking at the band. All eyes were on the main entrance. The grand oak doors had been pushed open, but it wasn't a waiter. It was the club manager, a man named Henderson, and he looked like he'd just seen a ghost. His face was pale and slick with sweat. Flanking him were two people who definitely did not fit the curated guest list. A man and a woman, both in severe, dark business suits. They looked like federal agents holding identical leather briefcases. The trio didn't stop at the door. They walked straight onto the dance floor, right past the stunned bride and groom, and headed directly for the head table. "Mr. Montgomery," the woman in the suit said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor. Arthur Montgomery stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "What is the meaning of this? This is a private event. Henderson, get these people out of here." "Sir, you don't understand," Henderson, the manager, stammered, wringing his hands. They're from the holding company. The people who own the land." The man in the suit spoke. "Mr. Montgomery, this is a notice of lease termination. The Oakwood Grand Country Club has been in severe breach of its land use contract. As of 7:30 p.m., the property is to be vacated. The event is over." The ballroom erupted. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was 100 different whispers, gasps, and the scraping of chairs. "Vacated?" Arthur Montgomery roared, his voice echoing. He snatched the paper from the woman's hand. "This is preposterous. I'll have your job. I'll buy this entire pathetic club and fire you all." "I'm afraid you won't, sir," the man in the suit said calmly, unfazed. "The owners are not interested in selling. They've already dispatched security. The premises will be cleared in 10 minutes. Eleanor Montgomery had rushed to her husband's side. "Arthur, do something. This is a humiliation." Sarah was standing frozen on the dance floor, her fairy tale turning into a nightmare. She looked at her new husband, David, but he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at his phone, his face paler than the club manager's. "Dad?" David said, his voice trembling. Dad, the accounts. I can't get in. The credit lines are frozen. What? Arthur spun on his son, and at that exact moment, as if summoned by the chaos, a second group of people entered the ballroom. These weren't club representatives. This was Ben's team. Three men in immaculate dark gray suits. They moved with the kind of predatory confidence that all the old money in that room only pretended to have. They ignored the club staff. They ignored the bride and groom. They walked directly to Arthur Montgomery, who was still sputtering about. Lawsuits. The man in the lead, my lawyer, Ben, didn't even blink at the scene. He simply held out a thick legal document. Mr. Arthur Montgomery? Ben said, his voice quiet, but carrying more authority than Arthur's shouting. My name is Ben Carter. I represent Agro Northern Holdings, the primary creditor for Montgomery Capital. A new, colder silence fell over the room. Arthur's eyes widened. He knew that name. You missed your last two payments, Ben continued, as if discussing the weather. We have exercised our right to call your entire note due. As of right now, all assets of Montgomery Capital are frozen, pending immediate seizure and liquidation. Arthur's face went from purple to a sickly mottled white. He grabbed the papers from Ben's hand. His eyes scanned the front page, his hands shaking so violently he could barely read it. No, he whispered. No, this is a mistake. We have time. We were negotiating. Negotiations are over, Ben said. You're bankrupt, Mr. Montgomery. You just don't know it yet. Eleanor Montgomery looked at the bankruptcy papers, then at the lease termination notice. Her mind, sharp from a lifetime of social climbing, was the first to make the connection. She looked at Ben, her eyes wide with a new kind of terror. Agro Northern Holdings, she whispered, the name tasting like poison. The company that owns the club land and the company that owns our debt, it's the same company. Arthur looked up from the papers, his face completely broken. Who? He stammered. Who is Agro Northern Holdings? Who would do this? All eyes in the room turned to Ben. He simply smiled, a thin, cold smile. I'm just the legal representative, he said. As for the owner, he insisted on handling this part himself. And right on cue, the main ballroom doors, which had been left open, swung wide. I stepped inside. I wasn't wearing my muddy work boots or my grease-stained jacket. I was wearing a custom-tailored Xenia suit that cost more than their Mercedes. My hands were clean. My shoes were polished. I had left the farmer back at the farm. I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. I didn't look at the guests, who were all staring, whispering, trying to place my face. I walked past the terrified club manager, past Ben and his team, and stopped right in the middle of the dance floor. I looked at Arthur, who was staring at me with a look of dazed confusion. I looked at Eleanor, whose mouth was hanging open. I looked at David, who just looked sick. Then, finally, I looked at my daughter. Sarah was still standing in her massive white dress, looking like a ghost. Her eyes scanned me, and I saw the exact second she recognized me. It wasn't confusion. It was pure, unadulterated horror. Dad? She breathed, the word barely audible. Arthur Montgomery squinted. I know you, he muttered. You're the farmer. I gave him a small nod. That's right, Arthur. I'm the farmer. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I took out a simple black business card and tossed it onto the head table. It landed right in a puddle of spilled champagne. My name, and under it 2 words. President. Agro Northern Holdings. You're right, Arthur, I said, my voice clear and calm in the dead, silent room. They do think of people like me as a lower race. The problem for you is that this lower race just bought your entire world. The ballroom didn't just go quiet, it died. The only sound was Eleanor Montgomery letting out a long, low wail as she finally fainted, slumping to the floor. Arthur just stood there, staring at my business card. his old money world crumbling to dust. But the worst was David, the loving groom. He looked at his father, then at me, then at Sarah. The calculation in his eyes was instant. The money was gone. The prestige was gone. He ripped the white rose from his tuxedo, threw it on the floor, and, without saying a single word to my daughter, he turned and walked straight out of the ballroom. He didn't even look back. Sarah just watched him go. Her fairy tale was over. She finally understood. She wasn't marrying into a higher race. She was marrying a parasite who was just as shallow as his parents. She turned to me, her face a mask of tears and ruined makeup. Dad, I didn't know. I I didn't let her finish. I had nothing left to say to her. I just looked at her, shook my head slowly, and said, "Enjoy your wedding, Sarah." Then I turned around and walked out. Ben and his team followed me, and the security team I'd hired moved in to peacefully escort the curated guests off my property. I didn't hear from her for a week. Then, one afternoon, I was out by the barn, back in my work clothes, fixing the same tractor engine I'd been working on before. My old pickup truck pulled into the driveway, but it wasn't me driving, it was Sarah. Her fancy car was gone, probably repossessed with the rest of it. She got out wearing simple jeans and a t-shirt, her hair a mess. She looked like the girl I used to know. She walked over, stood in front of me, and just collapsed. She fell to her knees in the dirt, the same dirt she had been so ashamed of, and she sobbed. "Dad, I'm so sorry. Please, please forgive me. I was so stupid. I was so blind. They they ruined me." I stopped working and looked down at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt tired. "They didn't ruin you, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet. "They just showed you who you were. Get up." She looked up at me, hopeful. Can I come home?" I sighed. Home isn't a place you just get to come back to when your other plans fall through. And respect isn't something you can just ask for, it's earned. You've got a long way to go to earn that back. She eventually got a job as a waitress in town. I see her sometimes. The relationship is quiet. It will take years, maybe forever. As for me, I'm right. Here. I'm still on my farm. The sun is coming up. I've got a good harvest this year, and my wife, Martha, is finally smiling again. She understands now. I'm still just a simple farmer, and I've never been happier. So here's the question for you. Was I right to do what I did, or did I go too far? What would you have done in my place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you don't want to miss another story like this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.